Good evening, my beguiling fans, even though it's bright morning. I am being contradictory today.
I couldn't tell.
I know, you're blind as a bat.
I'm also
But
oblivious to
half
subtext.
You are very beguiling today. There.
Why, thank you.
I gotta be nice.
Every once in a
I am a
while.
changed evil tyrant. I am now an evil tyrant who compliments his minions.
As he cuts off their heads. All in all, a net gain.
Yes. Regardless, today we are Adventuresome Reviews, reviewing Hall of Bones
By Tim Hardy.
a Viking Norse fantasy featuring Hrothgar as the second son to a chieftain at war.
And so Hrothgar is obviously the second son, and the first son is the one who inherits the kingdom, because their father is a great chief.
Here I was getting signed up for this epic synopsis so we could do our job for once. And then you just go, I'm going to write to the review with something that doesn't matter, even though my brother just told him he was the second son. I'm going to tell him again that he was the second son to prove how useless I am. My redemption phase is over.
About time. That was getting very boring.
I know, it's the same thing every day. Every video I make a redemption and then abandon it promptly.
At least you're consistent.
I know, that is the spice of life, consistency. And heads on pikes. That's why I have a picture of Vlad the Impaler above my bed.
With little hearts and
Yes.
really cool pink
And
sunglasses.
googly eyes.
Yes, of course.
Really big googly eyes. Anyway, you may now continue. Over my broken heart.
Well, I consider that a net gain. And so Hrothgar is never going to be the first in command. His life's purpose is to be an advisor to his brother, who is set to inherit the throne, which automatically makes for like kind of an interesting mechanic as the main character of our story, even if it does lend itself to the most basic foretelling available, that his brother is going to die eventually.
There's no part of the book I really found to be bad or weak. Every part of this book was solid in some regard. But at the same time, very little of it really shone for me.
I don't know, there were several scenes and several choices that the author made that I found distinctly appealing. Because, like, obviously, I said you could predict Jorik's death, who is Hrothgar's elder brother, from a mile away.
It does not help that the author opens the book by telling you everything is ruined and despair. And this is the one part of the book I did not like. So I read that,
Yes.
okay, what's the point of reading this book if everything is going to be in ruin and despair?
The very first chapter, you end up in the present with Hrothgar in chains, with everyone walking by calling him a traitor. Automatically, this tells you everything you need to know about the first half of the book.
Yes.
He was set up, and his home kingdom is going to fall to outside invaders via treachery. And this is at once nice to say, but that is the weakest part of the book, and like the only weak part of the book.
It really killed my motivation to read the book, and like the Norse theme is well implemented throughout the book. It is aesthetically pleasant. It affects the way the characters interact with one another, and consistent in the theming and how the cities are structured. All of this is consistent. It doesn't really affect the book in a tangible way per se, besides like the superficial aesthetics and the character work. And I would have liked it too.
And a little of the character interactions as well. The characters' personalities are affected by the Norse origins, which is really well done on the author's part.
Yes. Like I said, really well implemented Norse themes. Like you have raiding ships, the way the size of the forces, the way the battles are fought,
the way the men and the women interact to certain stimuli,
the way that you even move through the castles and the buildings. It is just a really well implemented theme. A less well implemented concept is the mythological fantasy elements. the fantasy elements are largely absent from the first half of the book. And the mythological elements are largely standard, which isn't necessarily a bad thing.
There was very little. So, on the one hand, I kind
Let
of
me finish the thought, please,
Okay.
because when I mean by standard, I mean standard, oh, this feels like Tolkien.
okay.
And again, not a terrible thing, but this is a Norse book. I wanted a Norse mythology,
Drugar.
because that's really
Nidavellir.
cool.
Yes.
Like, Norse mythology is awesome. It doesn't have to, like, be... I wouldn't even want, like, just copy and pasted, but I wanted the mythology to feel Norse. But it kind of ticked, like, one of my small pet peeves with a fantasy that it's kind of been growing as. You have a fantasy setting. All the cool stuff happened 500 years ago and is the Age of Legends, where all it was magic. I know, you had the dragons, and I was like, why is the story set in the boring period? And
Yes.
that was very evident. All of the magic, all of the monsters were...
We don't even necessarily get to interact with any of the relics of this age, because the book constantly drops little hints and makes mentions of this war of the gods that people are still recovering from. Not necessarily that there are giant swaths of nuclear wastelands or anything.
But yes, but that would have been better. That would have been cool. As it is, all the fantasy mythology is not here. We talk about it. It's like,
we get hints about it.
this is all the cool stuff, but I'm not going to actually let you experience any of it. And that makes me sound more peeved about it than I actually am. It's just, I want cool stuff in a fantasy book, and
Like, have some broken gods wandering around insane or something.
Or if the world is still recovering from this war, have the characters interact
with the nuclear wastelands, the horde abominations that no gods are left around to kill.
Leave the scars where the readers can interact with them, instead of just all the evil is locked away and it's going to come out eventually because it's a fantasy book.
That being said, I don't remember any mention of evil being locked away. It was just the
you had
mention.
your standard dark god, it's great evil, and your various echelons of enemies.
Yeah.
So, like I said, somewhat standard mythological fantasy.
At the same time, though, I would have enjoyed more fantasy elements, but at the same time, the book did a really strong job with its soft magic system.
That's the second part, the second half of the book. The second half of the book, I have lots of praise for. Because the second half of the book
is where we get past Hrothgar waking up in a cage, being called traitor, and we get
there's even more to it, because the first half of the book, Hrothgar is a well-structured character. You have decent level of moral complexity. You have
personal goals.
He's a competent fighter and leader without being, oh, I'm overpowered, or I'm all simpering and weak. He was a solid, well-structured character, but again, fairly straightforward. Like the rest of the story, it's an action story. You have whatever.
Like, even his character description is kind of well done, because obviously in Norse, and you expect Norse to be these big, brawly men with beards and battle axes. Hrothgar is slim and small, who only manages to survive on the battlefield because he is not a prodigy at the sword, but he is definitely skilled at the sword.
Yes.
And this book lends itself, in the first half, to this, using this multiple times. Like, at 15 or 16, he gets into his first battle and he acquits himself well, right? And then at another time, he is forced to defend the title of his family in a duel against a much older, much more experienced fighter. And he once again manages to acquit himself well, despite being I think something happened where he...
I vaguely remember.
Oh, yeah, no, it's like he takes a wound in a battle, and so he has to fight this significantly more experienced, larger warrior with a wound in like a significant wound, not like a belly wound, but like a wound on the leg or something. So a significant hampering, and he still manages to acquit himself well.
Yes.
And so he is a competent figure.
And he is constantly presented with different but compelling challenges, from being forced to make decisions and gambles, or being in tight situations where both action-wise and you have to make this decision and there's no right decision. And it makes for compelling, fun, interesting read for the first half.
And he gets put in situations that makes him uncomfortable. It's like where he has to choose between a friend and his brother. And not necessarily who to kill type of thing or who to trust, but that's where he has to make a choice as to, honor the friendship or honor my loyalty to the brother.
And and when I say political, because I'm going to say political eventually, when I say political too much,
Yes.
so I can politicalize more and just confuse
Yeah,
everybody.
let's continue.
There's soft political elements to the book.
That are really well handled.
And when I say political, I do not mean
Backstabbing.
I do not mean intrigue, but no, it's like just you have various kings and chieftains and
Marriages and the
conflicting loyalties, and it is
trying to form bonds with enemies so that you can unite and form a stronger force against the big bad.
yes, and it is just a really well implemented version of like Norse small king politics. And Hrothgar is fully implementing it, not as someone who is in control of the situation, but someone who has to obey his king, and while also having responsibilities to make certain things happen. And again, it just implements how well the book is structured, that Hrothgar, as the second in command, is treated and operates as a second prince throughout this entire first half of the book.
And he doesn't strive. It's like he doesn't strive for more. It's like he is given tasks and he pursues those tasks. It's like, and it's not that he doesn't have aspirations or goals, because he wants to be useful to his brother.
Yes.
And it just works really well because he is. It's an excellent look at a main character who is not the main character.
Yes. So that's why the first half of the book is solid. Absolutely solid, but fairly standard and straightforward.
And entirely hamstrung by the fact that none of it matters and all of it's going to go up in smoke.
Yes, and it is elevated by the great Norse mythology, by the great Norse theme. The second half of the book for me is where the book comes alive.
And this is where, I can't tell you because it's actually
huge spoilers that really matter.
But it's my favorite decision that the author made.
Yes. But to explain, it's like Hrothgar, like obviously you have the spoiler that his kingdom falls, he is betrayed, and Hrothgar's journey is, and the way Hrothgar is allowed to operate in the world, completely changed, not just from how he operated before, but how he wanted to operate before.
Basically, think a warrior forced to be a spy, but that is completely not the story. That is just a simile.
Yes, and this is part of the world where the soft magic starts coming in more.
And this, once again, it's handled really well because it's like, on one of his political jaunts, Hrothgar encounters 3 witches who are poisoning the mind of a rival king. And he has no access to magic, so he is completely outclassed. And the only reason he can survive this conflict is because the witches aren't necessarily throwing fireballs. They are Grima Wormtongue-esque characters.
Yes.
And they come across exceedingly well because of how they have this king's mind wrapped around their fingers. They're dangerous, and they are our first taste of this soft magic system.
Yes, and it's just, we get more of that, and without ever really exploding into huge fireballs and etc. And it just, you get spoon-fed more and more of it. And in the second half, you interact with it a lot more from not just an opposing, oh, this is the end we have, because you meet other spellcasters, and because again, in the first half, his objectives are straightforward and clear, and how he achieves them is straightforward and clear, compelling and fun, but straightforward and clear. In the second half, his objectives become difficult and
nebulous,
messy,
and there's no clear path forward. Even
what he needs to achieve isn't clear. How he's going to get it isn't clear. How he wants to achieve it isn't clear. Like, you know what you want to happen because you're the reader, and
this is all good because it's not the author not knowing the way forward. It's Hrothgar not knowing the way forward. It's the task he's faced with being so cataclysmic that even his advisors, the old and the wise around him, are left struggling.
And the tools he is given are limited and broken and incomplete, and it is so wonderfully just, this is not going to be easy. And the author sells it so well, and even the interpersonal dynamics get more complicated and messy, and it is, and not messy in like
a bad way or a dramatic way.
And
it's
not bad in a what drama, but the bad form of drama. Melodramatic, not bad, not messing up. Oh, you betrayed me. I hate you forever. And it is built again in Norse mythology and solid conflicts.
And so then you take all this and you put into the fact that the author handled character interactions really well. Like, even, it's like, there's no character that does not have a purpose, that does not have a personality, that does not have personal goals that often brush up and contend with those of Hrothgar. And this is for all the characters, right?
Yes. Even Hrothgar, like, again, first half of the book, solid motivations, character work, competence. All of that is thrown into chaos in the second part, which magnifies his character complexity because he's put at odds with the culture he was raised in, which so beautifully turns his fairly standard first half character narrative and arc.
The best part of the first half of the book is it sets up him as a character that then has to change.
Yes.
And that is just absolutely fantastic.
Yes.
But once again, just going like back to the characters, it's like the character interactions aren't just good, but the character interactions change from character to character. Hrothgar interacts with his father in a very different way from how he interacts with his brother, to how he interacts with his friend, to how he interacts with his father's chief advisor, a 110-year-old woman who is basically a political mastermind that's pulling the strings that he does not necessarily trust.
And you as the reader do not necessarily trust.
Until later on that stuff happens and she's kind of proven trustworthy. But even after she's proven trustworthy, she is still controlling and she's not telling Hrothgar everything.
Hrothgar or the reader everything, so you still don't trust her, even though you know she's an ally. It's just you don't know what she's trying to achieve because that's not the same thing as Hrothgar, who is your main character.
And it's like, this lends itself fantastically so that every character interaction is interesting. And it's like, there's lots of butting heads and it's just great.
Yeah, and so it's just great. I think I've said more or less everything I have to say about the book.
Me as well.
In conclusion, good but fairly standard first half, great Norse mythology, great Norse theme, excellent second half.
Yes. Like we said, the author only made one slight misstep, and that was telling you how the first half ended. Like, the moment you get rid of that, it's like the first half becomes really strong.
I wouldn't say really strong, but,
well, because
better. It's a good first half, but again, it's fairly standard. And fairly standard in a way that all of it does is good, none of it shines.
Okay, so actually one more thing. The way the author chooses to employ the soft magic, I really enjoyed, not because the soft magic is handled well, though it is, but because it's creepy soft magic. Not necessarily Stephen King horror, but one of the magic scenes is Hrothgar has a lucid dream of him standing on an empty dock in burning sunlight. And it's dead and it's silent, and one of the witches comes to visit him. And the witches are kind of creepy, controlling figures, and so then this is one of the scenes that I really liked.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's one of the scenes that I remember.
So yeah, all in all, pretty enjoyable book.
Yeah. Toodaloos, au revoir, goodbye.
Fare thee well, our future friend.